Greetings from the Freedom Industrial Complex. I am your formerly incarcerated host of the Notes from the Pen podcast, BC Kim, otherwise known as Bobby C. And today I wanted to try out a new segment. It's called The Idiocy of American Incarceration, and it's based on different examples of the carceral system in America attempting to make things better, only to make things so much worse than they would have if they just did nothing. And this theme has to do with the criminalization of addiction, and it's based on an essay I wrote called "From Junkies to Gangbangers" some years back, and posted on our website at Notes from the Pen. And it's a rather unknown aspect of the prison system. So, for those of you that don't know, usually before you come to prison, you spend time in county jail fighting your case, dealing with it before you get sentenced, and then go to the big boy leagues over in the prison system. And I'd say upwards of 80-90% of the prison populace were in active addiction when they caught their case, or at some point had dealt with addiction issues in their life. So when you go to county jail, depending on which county jail you're at, most of us dry out for the first time for a long stretch of time, months on end, up to a year. And in that time, we had a bunch of abilities that might have laid dormant or stagnant while we were in our active addiction. And so during this dry phase, we start to come back to life. We have realizations about what's important to us, what we're capable of, what we want to do with life. And ironically, it comes for many of us who go to prison right before you're shipped away to be disappeared from society, and to not only, be able to do anything positive, but to be removed entirely and try to survive. And one of the things that happens with the criminalization of addiction is that for most of us coming to prison, this is our first really long stretch of sobriety, right? And for those of us that are capable in our everyday lives or our abilities we have, except for addiction, when we come to prison, we realize that we could be valuable members of society. And where the system fails, rather than kind of fostering that and trying to heal people, right? Because the whole goal of incarceration, I think the focus on punishment for punishment's sake should be secondary to rehabilitation, right? Because if it serves a purpose, because I do believe prisons do serve a purpose. Now, we can argue and debate about what that looks like, and I think they're doing it entirely wrong because they're spending tons of money and getting very little results from it, right? And this is a great example of how things get worse based on how the system works. So, when I first came to prison, I went to a maximum security prison because I had so much time. And for about, the 3 or 4 months before I went to prison, I started meditating every day. I started writing. I started drawing. I started reading a bunch, speaking to people. Because that's one of the things about incarceration is you're forced around a bunch of people. And it's a test ground for ideas and theories. And we all get together and we talk and we debate and we argue and we play cards and we do all these other things. So by the time you come to prison, quite ironically, you usually have had a much better grasp on who I am and where my place in society could be, as opposed to where it was. And one of the first things that happened to me, in my mind, it was the first day, it might have been the second or third day. In level 4, you only have an hour, two different times throughout the day where you have an hour out to shower, to cook your food, to play cards, whatever it is. So when I got there, it was yard time for my rock, my little segment of the prison unit. And so I had like 30 minutes, because it was already going on, before I had to run back to my cell. And as I'm going there, a dude fully tattooed, looked like someone from a prison movie, blood in, blood out, full tattoos on his head, some on his face, Latino dude. As my door was shutting, he said, "Hey bro, do you rotate?" Now rotate means, are you in an organization? And are you a functioning, currently active member of an organization? I didn't know what it meant, so I said, like tires? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, we'll talk later as the door is closed, right? And one of the things that I realized that, this is why I think I'd been there a day or two, because he had watched me operate. And, there's a few things that disqualify you from being in an organization. One is having a sex case. If you're a rapist, child molester, any of that shit, you cannot be part of it. Not only can you not be part of it, people in organizations will target you, right? They'll either squeeze you and extort you or hurt you and get you off the yard. The other thing is you cannot be a rat. You can't tell on anybody. Now, it's hard to just judge, and I've learned this from being in prison, just looking at someone whether or not they're a rat, right? But I passed the eye test and a few conversational tests to where this guy said, do you rotate? He was interested. And he looked at some of my tattoos, and I had some 5-point stars, which for those, we can get that into that later, but there's a whole section of organizations that's one of their symbols. So immediately they thought I was possibly part of this. And I had to explain, like, no, I just worked in tattoo shops and always had a bunch of tattoos. And so, you know, it wasn't what they were thinking. So first they were checking my temperature to see if I was in the organization. And then when I said no, they sat back and watched for a little while. And this is, when I say they, I mean multiple organizations, I learned later. And one of the things you do to get out of your cell in level 4 in maximum security is go to religious call-outs, law library, just anything to get out because you're just in your cell, this little packed cell for so long. And so a long story short, there became a bidding war for me where two related organizations, so not at war with each other, wanted to recruit me. And I don't want to disqualify myself from certain things here or rat on myself, but let's just say that I was potentially recruited into an organization, and I spent years figuring it out and understanding it, learning it, and ultimately realizing, because it seems easy, right? It seems like, well, I would never do anything like that, and it's just bullshit. But that also is a misunderstanding of what these organizations are, especially in prison. I looked at it as a way to find some control in a situation where there was no control. And I don't mean by having power over other people. I mean that we lived by certain ethos and rules that were honorable. They're honorable. There's no, you're not supposed to lie, you're not supposed to cheat, you're not supposed to steal, you're not supposed to take advantage of people, you're not supposed to sexually harass women who work in the prison. And to me, it was a way to have this ethos that we all swore to, so that no matter where you went, to what prison or what joint or what unit, you knew that if someone was part of your club, that we were all held to a certain standards, and it was a way to control the people that you were around or were around you and the way we acted and interacted. So it's not just a flat out like, hey, it's not an unorganized, do you want to just like do violent shit or crazy shit? And so, you know, but over the years I became disenfranchised because I realized that the ethos that was supposed to be lived up to wasn't really a thing. But it didn't take long for me to realize that not every addict, just like if you were to take a random populace of the society, not all of the people are going to be capable, but some are, right? And the addicts that are capable human beings that have really good qualities that would help them succeed in society and socially, those people are recruited. The people that are actually a detriment and don't have anything to offer, they don't ever get recruited because they're not really seen as a high value acquisition, right? They want people that are charismatic, that are driven, that are disciplined, that are skilled, right? That can think outside the box, and even artists and all, tattoo, like all kinds of stuff. So I realized, wow, this is a breeding ground to take people that society has thrown away because of addiction, for the most part, is in the related crimes associated with it, and have discarded. And in that discarding, those addicts realize, damn, if it wasn't for addiction, like I have a lot to offer. And before you get to stand on your own 2 feet and start developing those qualities, which I did later when I started the podcast and writing and publishing and art and all this other stuff, you are snatched up by a group who is also like, hey, we'll put you to use, and I'll tell you what, we're going to be loyal to you, and we're going to stick by you, and we're going to have this camaraderie and all these other things. And that's all fine and dandy, right? I guess society at some point could say, yeah, maybe we could have made use of some of these people, but whatever, they shouldn't have been junkies or addicts or whatever it is, so whatever. And that would be more of like, it would be a net loss, but it wouldn't be as bad as what I realized was happening. So a lot of these people who are criminalized for being addicts, but otherwise haven't really lived a life of crime outside of their disease, a lot of them come from areas that don't have gangs, and they don't have real like typical crime problems, like from the inner city, like not a lot of violence, not a lot of obviously gangs or anything. And what ended up happening, and this is almost like in legal terms, there's something called fruit from the poison tree, and it doesn't apply directly, but it basically means, you know, if it doesn't matter what fruit it is, but if it came from a poison tree, it's kind of it's irrelevant. You can't use it. It taints everything. And there seems to be some sort of karmic thing, because what I saw happen was people who were addicts and joined these organizations, most of them are getting out, and a lot of them are getting out and they're going to places that don't have gangs or organizations in their cities. And after being discarded by these same communities, they go back to them and they bring that culture to that community. And then they start recruiting people from within that community, meaning the brothers, sisters, children, cousins, family members of the members of that community, who the state acted in their stead, in their name, to incarcerate these people that were thrown away. And then those same people, when they come back, start kind of infecting the area with gangs, with criminal activity, with criminal enterprises, and all these things that wouldn't have otherwise been there. And it's such a poetic, almost, if you saw it in a movie, you might think it was fake or it's cliche. And what it is it's a type of systemic karma, where a system throws people away instead of trying to fix them or help them. And then that same society that did these things ends up being much worse off for that. And it's a prime example of how the criminal justice system is failing. And this is why I said I think rehabilitation is much more important than the punishment part of it, right? Punishment can be an aspect as long as it's a deterrent. It's only as valuable as it is a deterrent to prevent these behaviors. But unless you're going to keep someone in prison forever, which with limited resources and space you can't, and money, or you're going to kill them in there, which also a bunch of money and court costs, and not to mention all you got to do is spend half an hour in an American prison system or a judicial system to realize they can't be trusted with deciding who's going to be killed and who's not. Because if you want to talk about flunkies that would never be recruited into anything, it's a lot of those people. So so for this first installment of the idiocy of American incarceration, I kind of wanted to point out this thing and to talk a little bit about it, just to give society a better picture of what's actually happening, because not too many people were on the outside, the inside, and now back on the outside, and can see all these interlocking, interconnecting things that cause and effect through multiple factors, right? And I think if more people knew about this, we would do a better job of treating addicts, and not just addicts, but everyone in prison who is going to be getting out, treating them with a little bit of compassion and grace, not just for their good, but specifically for society's good as well. Because we're all coming back, and you want us to be better than worse, right? And when you throw someone away and write them off, if they're a capable human being, someone will be there to step in and fill your spot and to use them for, let's say, less benevolent actions and missions. So that's about it. There's going to be more of this stuff to come. Hopefully you gleaned a little insight about what's happening in your name in the American carceral system. And if not, stay tuned. Maybe I'll have more. They're not going to be all like this. I'm going to do another series about absurd, ridiculous, crazy prison stories that I couldn't tell while I was doing the podcast from the inside, but I can now. We can get into some of that sauce. And those are going to be some of the things that might grow a little more viral. But yeah, this was a start, and I wanted to drop this on you. So if you got anything from this, go visit us on Patreon, which is probably where you're seeing this first, because the Patreon members get all the first sauce. But share, like, link, go to Notes from the Pen everywhere you can on every social media platform. And there's a lot more to come. So on behalf of myself, Mama C, and all of us junkies who turned to gangbangers and made it out the other side and are doing something positive on the way out, we love you, we respect you, we miss you already, and we are gone. We gone.